Hello, everyone. It is Jaime and Nathan, and it is Friday evening, which means it's time for part 5 of the body image series with Cerebral Palsy Sunrise with Jaime 8 and Nathan Todd. And tonight we have the pleasure of discussing, let me just put it in the chat here, if I can multitask, the personal responsibility of body image. And as you all know, this is Nathan's side of the house. So we're going to be handing things over to him tonight to kind of kick us off. But for those of you who have not joined us before, I am the founder of a page for adults with cerebral palsy called Cerebral Palsy Sunrise. And I will let Nathan introduce himself. Hey, Nathan.
Hey guys, so my name's Nathan and I run No Label Defines Me Coaching. I am what I like to call the Chief Eradicating Officer. I help people who are dealing with loneliness find the connection that they want in their life. I'm super excited. I love these conversations, and from everything I can see as I've followed along, you guys seem to resonate with this topic a lot. A lot of you guys are providing your insights and you're joining along, and we'd love to see that. So one thing I wanted to do before we kind of dive into the deep discussion right now is I want to take a moment, and I just want to, in whatever way you can, if you're watching along with us, to close your eyes, and I want to do some breathing.
All right.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to get started with. It's been a long week, I'm sure, for a lot of people. So just kind of close your eyes, get comfortable, whatever that looks like for you. And then I just want you to take a deep breath in, and it can be through your mouth or through your nose, whatever is best for you. I want you to hold it. And then I want you to audibly sigh to release it. All right, we're going to do one more, okay?
Okay.
So let's take a deep breath in. And then let it loose with a sigh or an audible sound. All right. It's always good to start off with something that gets us physically in our bodies. And that way we give some people time to jump on because we're a little bit early today. But thanks everybody who's taking the time right now to jump on with us. And I want to ask this question, and I want to ask it to you, Jaime, for a little bit of your reflection.
Okay.
And if you guys have watched along as we've done this, I want to hear from you as well. But as we've talked about body image, what's been a realization that you've had in leading this conversation?
Very good question, by the way. And Nathan knows that breathing is one of my favorite things. So thanks for starting us off with that. One of my biggest realizations in starting this series is this is truly something not very many people want to talk about. Even more so than dating or some of the other topics we've discussed. This is a little bit taboo. There's some baggage surrounding this that I wasn't expecting. So I think that's been my greatest takeaway.
Yeah, and then if you guys have any insight, what your greatest takeaway has been up until this point, and I definitely want to touch on your insight because it made me think of, I think that leads perfectly into what we're talking about here today, which is the idea of personal responsibility. And I think body image can be a hard topic because of that personal responsibility. And like I looked up the definition, and I think you gave it during one of the first ones, but the one that I saw, it says body image is the the mental representation you create of you.
Yeah.
You create it of you. So
Yep.
each one of us create our version of us for ourselves, but we are very good at, I'm going to use the word blame.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it's blaming other people for that version that we create. I think that's the right word, is
Yep.
blame. And I can't say, I'm not going to say that I disagree with that. I say you're robbing yourself of power when you do that. When you blame other outside things for what you're creating for yourself, you are robbing yourself. And that's why it's so hard, because it's hard to look in the mirror sometimes.
Well, and it's hard for people who have an able body, right? Much less people who have bodies that fail them or don't live up to the standard that we all would like to have. So I think that is a double whammy. And the good news, bad news is this is a problem of inclusion, right? Our able-bodied friends and family have just as much trouble with this as we do. And it's just as taboo to talk about it. So the good news, bad news is this is a problem that everyone has. There's just some unique spins on it that are layers to the onion that are added because we do have a physical disability.
Yeah, and I think that it comes down to, along with us taking the responsibility of what it looks like for us, it also comes along with that acceptance of ourselves and the acceptance of, like, when I think of that definition of the mental representation of you, like when you get told of all the things you can't do all the time, that plays a huge role in how you view yourself. And when you get told, like what time did you say it? But it was whenever you talked about, yeah, that guy told me it'd be good if your legs weren't like.
Yeah, it would be good if your legs were, you're a great gal. It'd be good if your legs weren't effed up, right? Yeah, that was last week.
So
yeah.
Those are real conversations that happened for many of us. And as I was thinking about that, I was thinking personal responsibility in this area looks like a couple of things to me. First, I would ask, how much time do you spend on social media?
Me?
I mean, you can answer that for you, but I'm asking in generalities for the people watching, how much time do you spend on social media?
I would say a minimum, especially because of Cerebral Palsy Sunrise, a minimum of an hour a day. Because even if I don't look at anything else, even if I just look at CP Sunrise, I've got 30 minutes of looking at responses and 30 minutes of creating posts for the next day, right? So at a minimum, an hour. But honestly, there could be days where it's as much as 2 or 3 hours if I'm creating content like we are tonight.
Yeah. And like, how many times are we scrolling and all we think about is, well, I don't look like this person, or I'm not doing everything that they're doing in the world. And that starts to impact how we view ourselves.
It does.
And I think this is bigger than just body image. This is like your whole self, like all of you. You get to take responsibility for all of you, all aspects of you. And one of the things I would tell anybody is, if you're surrounded by all these things that are telling you you can't, that are making you feel bad about yourself, it's time to cut that out. Like, it's time to make an intentional effort to say, look, this isn't good for my mental health. I'm going to choose to stop looking at my phone the first thing I do when I wake up. I'm not going to look at my phone.
And I feel guilty as you're saying that, because what I was doing right now was sending invites to some people that I know wanted to join us tonight, to let them know that we've started the live. And that's a perfect example right there, right? Of, right live in session. Social media is right there, and it's impossible to put away, especially when you're part of a community that uses social media as their main mode of transportation, right?
And I think, and I say that with love too, because I understand that social media is a big way of connecting. But I would ask you, are you getting the connection that you actually want in your life? Or are you doing it? I mean,
well, let's put it this way. I think there's good days and bad days, right?
Yeah,
Me as a content creator, and you know what my goals are for CP Sunrise. I try really hard to make it a collaborative, positive space. So I would like to think that the majority of the days I am successful in that. But the reality is, mathematically, I'm not successful in that every day. So I think I have a good batting average, but nothing's perfect, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, anybody who hops on and they watch this, it's being able to become aware of how it makes you feel. If social media, you don't feel like it has a huge impact on your self-esteem and your self-image, then go for it. But if you're sitting there and all you see and all you resonate with are all the negative things, take a break, cut it off. Don't look at it. I can tell you, when you look at it first thing in the morning, you're already going by the way of somebody else's thoughts. Like, you are setting yourself up just to be freaked out or be led by someone else. And you are a unique person who has their own thoughts, their own dreams. And I think that if you limit social media, at least first thing in the morning, you can start to win that battle more.
We have two comments that I'd like to share with you. One is Jill Rosa, and she says that she finds that if she's around people who support her and encourage her, she feels better about her body and what she looks like.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Who doesn't want people being like, hey, you look good today?
Right? I mean, it totally helps. Doesn't hurt. And then one of our viewers from Ireland hopped on, and I hope I don't butcher her name. I believe it's Ciara O'Dwyer. And she says hi from Ireland. So hello. And if we butchered your name, tell us how to say it in the chat. But hello from Ireland. And Jill, we agree with you. I mean, you are the company you keep, right? So I think the one thing to take away from that is, we all can't get compliments every day. But if you are in an environment where you're around people who are constantly putting you down, that says a lot, and you need to, try and remove yourself from that situation as best you can.
And it might be hard to do that, but it's 100% possible to do that. And I will give you a great book if you feel like you're somebody who's surrounded by that negative environment. I would tell you to read Man's Search for Meaning. It's during World War II, I believe. The guy was in a concentration camp, and it's his journal. And I would just invite you to read that and come to your own conclusion about how powerful our mind is. And I was on a call earlier with the neuroscientist, and one of the things that he said was, what if you being born with cerebral palsy was exactly what's supposed to happen? You were born the exact person you were supposed to be, and you are given gifts that are unique to you because of the circumstance you've been placed in. And chances are you don't hear that a lot. That's not the feedback you're getting 100%.
It's certainly not what I hear played back in my own head, even if other people are going to say it to me. It's not what's on the reel in my head. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or when we talk about self-talk. Now, I wouldn't say that my self-talk is necessarily negative, but I would not say that it is where it would be for me to say I am exactly where I am supposed to be, and it was meant to be this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nope,
I think that takes a lot of work to get to that place. And I would say even people who get to that place have days where they still come back to what in the hell is going on here?
Yeah, it's impossible for it to be a permanent location, right?
Yeah.
And I think I will say there's a layer to that of we were born this way versus, earning it some other way that makes it hard to say, because we never had a chance to do that. We never had a chance to do the other. We never had that option.
Yeah.
So it makes it hard for me to say this is exactly what was supposed to be, because, well, it's not, I didn't get to pick, right?
Yeah. And so I choose to look at that in the way of, hey, we didn't get to pick, right? But in reality, we don't get to pick a lot of things. And so I would say if you limit social media, I would also say the comment about positive, encouraging things. Like you said, you're not going to hear that every day. I would challenge that and say, well, if you don't hear that every day, it's your responsibility to say it to your damn self.
Right. And we did cover that in episode 1 with some of the affirmations, right?
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I'm not broken. My brain is, my sexiest attribute, and, everything's going to be okay. Right. Because especially with COVID, we could go for very extended periods of time without the engagement or interaction of others, to help with our views. So, and there is nothing that can go south faster than your self-talk. Self-talk is one of the fastest moving things on the planet, right? You can go from a good day to a bad day in 15 seconds or less, right?
Yep.
And nobody would ever know, because the only person hearing it is you. So yeah, so definitely the case. Nathan, as it comes with body image and responsibility, and kind of, what we've been discussing in some of the other episodes, where do you think that we as a disabled community fall short as far as our responsibility? I know where I think, but I want to hear yours first.
Yeah. So you just want me to this is for all the haters out there probably.
Yep.
But where do we fall short? We sit on couches and we accept it as the only possibility of what's supposed to happen for our lives. And now, there are multiple layers to all this. I would say one of the biggest disservices we do within our own community is we don't see success modeled.
We don't.
We don't see successful people with disabilities. And when we do, we see one picture of just that. Like I said, I wrote a thing about 10 pieces of advice I would give a disabled kid. And I said, we're not all going to be motivational speakers. And
Nope.
I'll say it in here the way that I told you, because I told you exactly. We're not all going to be motivational speakers, and we're not all going to go be greeters at Walmart, and you don't have to be either one.
Right. You don't have to be either one, or you could be somewhere in the middle, or you could be one of those. But you don't have to. We have so few examples that you do not have to feel pressure to mimic whatever rare example you see, because we are just not equally represented, and it's not fair to say that everybody's going to be the same, because we're not. And hi, Kimberly, thank you for joining us. And Marilyn says, your mind can make you have a good day or a bad day, and good friends can certainly help.
Absolutely. And I love the fact about the friends piece, because I think that's another thing that we don't model very well.
Yep.
Is we talk about inclusion all the time, but most of the time everything that is modeled for us is segregation, and we do that ourselves. All of us in this group have cerebral palsy, right? That's a commonality that we share. But the thing that I always say is, if we really want an inclusive world, that means we have to have the courage to go out and be part of those other communities, and don't be the angry disabled person that says, why are you discriminating against me, blah, blah, blah. You got to change the way you talk so that you show up and represent yourself the way that you want people to see you, not let your anger take over. Because look, I'm sure many people can relate to this. Every day I step out of the door right now, because I'm not stepping out anywhere, but every time I'm out in public, I feel an obligation to represent what disability looks like in the world. And I'm not just talking about cerebral palsy. I'm talking about
the community at large.
Yeah,
the community at large. I would agree with that. And just for full disclosure, because you see Nathan and I on our own pages creating content and collaborating here together weekly, you may think, well, Jaime and Nathan don't have bad days. They have their stuff together. Well, full disclosure, Nathan, did I not just message you last week and say, hey, I need to vent? The haters are hot and I'm having a bad day, right? So, I mean, even if it seems, on the outside, like Nathan and I have all our eggs in one basket, even we have bad days, and we're creating content trying to help, everyone that we can. And even we struggle with, a lot of the feedback, that we get back. So, even we have bad days.
Yeah, because I'll tell you stuff that people say to me all the time. They're like, well, why don't you just focus on serving people with disabilities? And I have to be like, because that's not what I'm called to do. Like, I will serve people with disabilities, but most of the issues that we all have, like, again, the silo effect. Like, my issues are human issues. A circumstance that is part of those issues is having cerebral palsy. And I think that is another problem, where often our only identity becomes the disability that we have. So, I mean, our label or our identity, it is everything that we have. And whatever identity you have, that's why you're showing up the way that you are.
True. Yeah. And I know, we've talked about teenage years, childhood, adulthood. I don't think this is something that stays in one place, right? No. I think this is something that is a continual every day until you hit the grave kind of thing. Right now, you and I are both in a place where we have pretty good body image, especially based on the averages of our community. However, that doesn't mean if we make some changes in our lifestyle or changes in our who we associate with, that we couldn't go right back down the totem pole of not accepting ourselves if we kept the wrong company. So this is something that really requires genuine effort, and to maintain. It's not like you just cross the finish line and I'm there. You really have to you really have to keep going, and there are going to be some surprise curveball stuff. I get a lot of feedback from people in the community who are struggling as they age with accepting using canes and walkers and mobility devices, because
that's interesting.
Mhm.
Many of us who are probably using those, we started that way.
We started that way. So people in our own community are struggling with, well, I haven't had an AFO in a decade, and now I need an AFO. I haven't used a cane in 20 years, and now they say I need a cane. Well, newsflash. As you age, those things happen. As you age with a disability, those things are more likely, right? Yeah. So even if you are diligent in your physical upkeep, it's not gonna it's not gonna keep it from catching up with you. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And my thing is, embrace it. Pick whichever one is the easiest for you to use, that makes you feel the safest, and just get out there and keep going. So if you can move quickly with a cane, do it. If you have to go to a chair, find your favorite Quickie or Hot Wheels model or whatever it is, and embrace that bad boy. If you're like me and you need to, use a walker in large spaces, do like I did, find the triangle walker with the 3 wheels, super aerodynamic. Take that bad boy everywhere you go. Like, find the yes. Don't fight the stuff you can't control. And having to welcome a mobility device or an AFO back into your life is not something you can control. It really is not.
So that just reminded me of, like, my grandma, when she was alive, she used to come and stay with us for the winter times because she lived in Iowa. And it was funny because she would always use rollator.
Yep.
Whenever we would go places. But it's so interesting that when we would go places together, she would try and give me her rollator. Right. To let me use the rollator. And that's how interesting human beings are, right? Because again, that goes back to her identity of disability in a bigger picture of, look, I'm just old, and right. he's got a disability, so let's share this,
right?
Let's make it work. And I would say the question to ask yourself there, if you are one of those people who are transitioning to using a mobility aid more often than you were before, what's your quality of life without it, right, compared to it? And
also safety. Like, if it's going to help you to avoid injury, by all means, because the thing that sets us all back the most is if we take a bad spill and injure ourselves. So if that mobility aid is going to keep you safe, name it, paint it whatever color, and go for it, because that's way better than taking a chance of a lethal fall.
Well, and like, this took me a long time, because I would be the guy who's like, I can walk, so I'm just gonna walk. Like, I don't care how hard it is, I'm gonna do it. And I thought that it made me like everyone else, but my mom was like, so by the time you get to where you're going, are you able to have fun with your friends? Right? And so that's
right. It's the truth, right? Like, we only get so much energy for the day. How are you going to spend it, right?
Yeah, and let's be for real. If we all, let's say we all like a day we have 24 hours. Let's assume that our energy is like that and we all get the same amount of energy. We already know that we use it 3 to 5 times faster than everybody else. So
Right.
you get to be smart with how you use it.
Exactly. Yeah, and you have to, I think responsibility is honesty, right? And being honest with yourself is one of the hardest milestones to overcome, no matter if you have a disability or not, but especially if you have a disability, to say, you know, like you said, is this really the best use of my resources? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, you know? So
I had to realize that as a speaker. Like, I was like, if I stand up the whole time, I'm not an effective speaker because I become way too tired way too quickly. And it loses the impact that I'm able to have if I'm out there just, I mean, let's be real. People can see when you're in pain.
Yeah.
And when you tire out, you're in pain.
I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, right? Just like the episode, or the example I used of the episode last week of, hey, you know, if I've been in an airport all day and it's 9 p.m. and I go to cut my food, my hands may tremor because at that point I'm really going into the reserves to, you know, to appear as normal as possible, right? But there's some things when it comes to CP you just cannot avoid.
So I love that you went to the definition of, or you use normal, right? Because here's a question that I think we get to ask more often too. Like, we make up this, like, it's just a made up definition, and like we have it in our mind, but how often do we actually say what it actually means? So I would challenge anybody to actually sit down and reflect on, if you had your dictionary, how do you define normal?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then based on what that looks like for you, like, what's normal for you, right? Not what's normal for Nathan, not what's normal for Jaime. What's normal for you? What shows up in your life every day that you deal with every day? Because that's what's normal. What shows up on a daily basis, that's normal. That's consistent. And we're shooting for targets that aren't our targets. Like, every single person has a different definition. Every single person. But we all think that it's this one thing. And it's just like success, right? We have one like version of what it means to be successful. And that's why so many people are unhappy with the way that they look, the way that they feel, because they're shooting for something that they don't even want, but they can't look themselves in the mirror and say, like, let's say, like, for me, I want to be a professional speaker, but I know that there are people who success may look like being a dad, being a mom, and that could equal success. So I think we get to spend more time taking the responsibility to define important things for us. Like, I would define, what does a meaningful relationship look like to me?
Right.
What does it mean to be an effective communicator? Like, what does it mean to be a good friend?
Mm-hmm.
What type of people do I want in my life? Like, and I would venture to guess not many people are asking themselves these questions.
I would say you were probably right. I would also say that it's very unpopular in our community of the disabled world, whether that be disability at large, or CP specifically, that it is very unpopular to get in the face of a disabled person and say, if you do not like your life, that is your problem.
Oh, yeah.
That is not popular. And the reality that we're discussing in responsibility, personal responsibility of body image, is exactly that. If you do not like your life, there is no one but you who can change it, and there is no one but you who is responsible for it. That's it.
Yeah. And it
So
doesn't matter who won an election. It doesn't matter any of that stuff. Like, there are things that are going to impact your life, but they're not impacting them as closely as the conversation and the responsibility you take for your own life. And there's people in worse circumstances than you that are doing things that you wish you could do right now, 100%.
And even if you rely on the assistance of family members or caregivers, they can only know how to properly help and assist and improve your life if you speak up. Yeah. You are the one that has to say, this is what I want, this is what I need, this is what I'd like to have. Even if you need help in achieving it, the responsibility of communicating those needs still relies on you. It is not the responsibility of your caregiver or your family member or your partner or your husband or your wife or your sibling to make you feel good about yourself. That's not their responsibility. And it's not their responsibility to help you with your body image. Now, they may, because they love you and they support you. And if they do that, that's great. But at the end of the day, that's your responsibility, which is kind of what makes this such a hard topic, right?
Yeah. How many mad faces are we going to get? That's what I'm wondering.
We could have a personal best tonight, Nathan. We could have the largest amount. But really what it's about is embracing that you are in charge of you. Because I think as disabled people, we are too often given the green light to blame our unhappiness on our disability, blame our unhappiness on our literal body itself, blame it on how other people perceive us, blame it on how other people treat us. And that only takes you so far, right?
One of the most powerful exercises I ever did was we had to sit and draw a picture of ourselves naked and talk about the things we didn't like about our body. And then what we were asked to do was, after reflecting on that, like tricking our brain and saying, I love the way that I walk. I love my hips because that creates the way that I walk. Something like that. Like,
right. And we all know we have unique gaits. If you're lucky enough to be ambulatory, we all have unique gaits, and we all have a swing pattern to our gait that's required based on our level of mobility. And so we all know what we're talking about when we say we love our walk. That's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, none of this is easy, people. That's for sure. And it's a daily thing. We've talked about it for multiple minutes here. It's a daily thing. You have to choose it every day. And you get to choose days when you say, hey, today I'm taking a break.
Yep.
Like today, maybe if it's for 10 minutes, I'm going to, like you said, I need somebody to vent to. I'm going to give myself space to mourn what's happening right now, the sense of loss that I feel, because I think that's what happens a lot, and we don't talk about it in that way.
No, because we also don't want those that love us or those that are around us that don't struggle with this to have guilt for what they are able to do, right? I think a lot of us stay quiet for good reasons, for reasons that aren't necessarily negative. But a lot of us live in situations where our loved ones are not in the same boat we're in. and we don't necessarily communicate what we're going through, because we do not want to make those around us who don't have to do that feel, any guilt or reservation. And so I think that's why it's important that we have spaces like your space and spaces like my space, where you have like-minded people, where, I'm not going to, make you feel uncomfortable or guilty if I talk to you about these sorts of things, because you're also experiencing them. Whereas if I pick someone in my inner circle who I'm close to, who is able-bodied, I risk being pitied, or worse yet, making them feel guilty for what they're able to do. And that's not really what you're going for. What you're trying to do is let go of it by verbalizing it and releasing it. But you have to be very careful with who you release it to, right?
And I think that's a very powerful thing. Like, I would also say, going back to who you spend time with, right? If you spend time with a lot of people who don't have disabilities, like, I think one of the best things to say is, hey, I just need to say this to you, and this is not to make you feel any sort of way. I just need to release it for myself.
Right.
Like, and say that up front, and then tell it to that person, and then let it go. Like, because this is one of the few spaces where you're going to find somebody who's dealing with similar issues. So if you need somebody in the moment and they don't happen to have those circumstances that line up with you, I would say just be clear about the reason why you want to talk to somebody, and then release them of the responsibility of creating any kind of feeling by saying, hey, I just want you to listen. I'm not expecting anything else. And human beings are really sucky at that.
Right.
Because we're very reactive.
We know, and we know better than anybody in the whole wide world that there is no fix to our situation, right? There's no fix today. There will be no fix tomorrow. We have a brain injury. There is no fix. So it's a tall order to ask those around us who love us the most to listen, right? So you need to find the right receptacle for that process. And that's why I encourage so many people. I don't think there's anyone in any community, much less the disabled community, who could not benefit from having access to a counselor, either long-term or short-term, because that truly is one of the only spaces where you're going to be able to get this stuff out and get the right kind of feedback. It is the only way. I don't know any other way than for you to engage with a professional and just get it out there and deal with it, and and get back the I don't want to say unbiased, but the appropriate feedback to get you to the next space.
You probably, in that moment, a lot of times you probably feel like it's gonna be a bias, like because you're probably gonna hear the shit that you don't want to hear,
right?
Which I think is another thing about the image, right, that we do a horrible job at, is actually accepting. Like, we get in so many fights because somebody says something that we don't agree with.
Right.
Man, so if somebody calls you ugly, here's what I will tell you to tell them. I will say, thanks for the feedback, and move on. Like, if they're telling you that, how much do you want to give credence to what they said?
Right.
And if you find yourself accepting that multiple times, again, that means it's time to look at where you're hanging out and who you're hanging out with, because they don't have your friendship in mind if that's what you get all the time.
Yeah, they do not have your best interest at heart. That is not, what you need to engage with if you can help it. Like we said, we know there are some scenarios where, you may not be able to remove yourself. However, even if you cannot remove yourself, you can always stick up for yourself or amend the behavior by letting them know that you no longer want to hear it, right?
Yeah.
So, and that is also your responsibility. People aren't going to stop saying things if they don't know you have a problem with it. So, if you don't like, how someone refers to you or the way that someone speaks to you, or even in a caregiver situation, if you don't like that people speak above or around you, as though you're not there, because we've all had that happen, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
The only way to correct that is to speak up and say, "Excuse me, I appreciate your assistance, but please remember I'm still here," right?
Yeah, that's the most interesting thing, I think, because that again is something that happens throughout our life, no matter how old or how young we are. The people speaking about us in front of us, but not to us,
Right.
and like that is probably one of the most infuriating things. Like that will probably make me, as self-aware as I am, that's one of the things that flips my
it'll flip your switch. And no matter how woke you are to your personal situation, it'll take you right back to first grade, right? Because you're like, really, seriously, I've got, a college degree and all this other stuff, and you're going to speak as if I'm not here, as if I have no brain, as if I don't understand what you're saying. Holy crap, right? And you're like, how can this be possible? All of this is possible because I walk differently than you do? How does that make sense? It doesn't make sense, but it happens, right? It's not about it making sense.
That's when you see, like, when you see me, like, be an asshole is when I feel like somebody's talking in that way to me. Like, one of the things that I'll say is, hey, I just want to remind you that you're dumber than a dude with a brain injury. And they're like, what? Wait, what?
What? Yeah.
And that I would say that's not the appropriate way to respond, but it happens.
But we all have our triggers, right? Yeah. We all have our triggers. For you, it's when people talk above, over, and around you, right? Mm-hmm. For me, I told you that my trigger was I am the nastiest bitch possible in an airport, right? Because my immediate trigger is people who don't know me in 5 seconds of my life, asking me what's wrong with me as I'm on my way to the elevator. Like, no, like it's obvious I have a place to go. Leave me alone. So we all have our triggers. And do I have the mental capacity to handle it better? Absolutely. Do I have the years of practice and therapy that says I've paid to know how to handle it better? Yes. Does it mean that I handle it better? No, it doesn't, right? Some days I do, but I am not going to say that I handle it better every day because that's just not the truth. And Atlanta Airport and I do not get along, and that's just all very good.
Yeah, that's not a great airport for sure. But I would say this too, in those moments that we all have that we're talking about right now, it's remember that when these types of situations happen, when you are being triggered, your brain is being flooded with cortisol and stress hormone. And when that happens, your brain shuts down to be in survival mode, like you're being chased by a tiger. Like we're still there evolutionarily. That's where we're at. So chances are higher that how you respond is just a reaction to the stress that you are seeing in your body.
Right. And it just is what it is as far as the the happenings of it. And part of how we're going to wrap up the series next week, believe it or not, Nathan, next week is our last week with this topic, and I'm going to put it in the chat so all of you can see. Our final topic for part 6 is managing the challenges of disability and body image. So basically the active application of how do we get around these challenges. Now, each episode we've talked about a coping mechanism, whether it be affirmations, counseling, defining what your definitions of normal are, and your definition of successful is, and your definition of even body images, the ways that we define them for ourselves. We've talked about, your own personal responsibility for, if you're not feeling good about yourself, then it's your responsibility to say, is it that I need to spend more time on my physical self, my spiritual self, my mental self? What part of my body image do I have the biggest problem with? Because it's not just, your face and your abs, right? It's all of it. So really narrowing in on which part of that, and you have to eat the elephant one bite at a time. So you might not do them all at once, but picking where you want to start. And the biggest disservice you can do for yourself as a disabled adult is not to start now, right? Because if you haven't dealt with it, there is no better time than the present, unfortunately. So
you're the youngest you're ever going to be right now.
Yeah.
Right.
So, it's
you're not
all
getting
downhill from here. So, take it today and make a change and make it different. I know for me, this series, and this is the 4th series that I've done as moderator of Cerebral Palsy Sunrise. This series has gotten the most feedback, both solicited and unsolicited. So, that being the case, this may be a topic that we broach yearly, and see how it changes for all of us as COVID passes, as socialization increases, as our schedules get back to normal. Because I will say some of these things are certainly heightened by the isolation that we've been experiencing the last few months.
Oh, 100%. When you're just looking at a computer screen, that's hard to, we are built for physical touch 100%. So with saying that, I would say, if that's something specifically that you are missing is physical touch, science shows that, if you need one way to self-soothe is to actually do the hug motion on yourself. But what we want to make sure is there's skin-to-skin contact.
Right.
Because that's what releases the dopamine in the brain. So that's what you want to practice, is finding a way to, as much as possible, create that scenario where you're releasing those chemicals for yourself. And so, I mean, that's super, super easy to pretend to give yourself a hug. If you need a shot of feel good, go do that for 30 seconds.
Exactly. And I will say, even though it's not something that I use personally, I have seen a lot of conversation in the last 3 months in several of the adults with CP groups surrounding weighted blankets. A lot of people have found a lot of comfort using a weighted blanket, especially at this time right now where human contact and human touch is at an absolute minimum. A weighted blanket has really helped a lot of people in easing their anxiety and helping them get to sleep. And we know that lots of people with cerebral palsy struggle with insomnia. So if that's something that is a struggle for you, finding a weighted blanket is certainly something that is worth a shot. It doesn't work the same for everyone, but I have seen that for the large majority, people are saying that it does help. So
Yeah. I've seen somebody that was they had autism and
mhm.
they were stimming out, so their body was overstimulated.
Yep.
And we put a weighted snake on him. And as soon as that weighted snake was on him, he was able to like regulate what was going on for him. So I've seen the power of them working. I don't personally have one yet, but that's something definitely outside of the disability community right now. There's
Right.
a lot of conversation that's happening around that.
Mm-hmm.
If you are someone who struggles with sleep, I will tell you one of the things that you can implement tomorrow is make sure in the morning you go out and you get sunlight. If that means you go sit on your porch, wherever you need to sit, you get actual sunlight, because that starts the process of melatonin for later in the evening.
Yep.
And then that's how we help regulate our sleep. Now, I know that that's not going to work for everybody, but I know that's scientifically proven. So start getting some vitamin D in your life, and it will change how you feel and how you're able to sleep.
And Natalie says that she is a supporter of the Weighted Blanket Nation, that she thinks weighted blankets are awesome. So like we said, it is something that is a fairly easy entry to try. And if for some reason it doesn't work for you, then it is certainly something that you could pass on to another friend or family member that they might appreciate. So if you're experiencing a lot of anxiety or insomnia, definitely give it a shot. Doesn't hurt to try it, right?
Yeah. And I would say before we close out today, I would just ask everybody again, like, what have you learned during this series? And kind of what are your takeaways right now?
Yep.
What other type of stuff do you want to hear about, talk about? This
Yeah,
type of
there's not really much that Nathan and I as a pair aren't prepared or willing to speak about. So those of you who are diehard loyal watchers, who I know some of you in the West Coast will be watching this a little later in the recording, because a lot of you hit me up with the recording, let Nathan and I know. And it's okay to tell us, if you didn't like the series. We want your genuine feedback, because, we take the time to create these series for you, for this community specifically. So your feedback is really what both of us go off of, both for our collaborations and also for our independent pages, to get you, the support and the feedback that you want as adults. So let us know, how are we doing? What can we do different? What do you want to talk about next? And I think that tees us up great for next week. I'll be here at 5:30. How about you, Nathan?
Yeah, I'll be right here, same time, same channel.
All right. Well, we will be here next week, everyone, for the final in our 6-part series of body image. As always, it's you that makes our community what it is, and it's you that we appreciate having here. So thanks so much for taking the time, whether you joined us live or whether you watch us in the recording. Don't forget to put your comments in the chat, and we'll see you again next week. Bye, Nathan.
Bye, everybody.